Hi, I am Sergiold, and welcome to Animo Teach. Are you ready for today's lesson? In this video, I am going to teach you about the different non-textual elements and how to use it properly in writing the results section of a research paper. Sound interesting to you? Let's dive into it. Today, we are going to talk about writing the results section of a research paper using non-textual elements. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify the different non-textual elements used in writing the results section, understand the importance of the non-textual elements, and apply the appropriate structure and writing style on writing the results section using non-textual elements. Definition of common non-textual elements. Number one, diagram. A drawing that illustrates or visually explains a thing or idea by outlining its component parts and the relationships among them. Also, a line drawing made to accompany and illustrate a geometrical theorem, mathematical demonstration, etc. This is an example of a diagram. It illustrates a theoretical model. In research, it commonly used to visually explains the theoretical framework or the conceptual framework. Number two, figure. A form bounded by three or more lines, one or more digits or numerical symbols representing a number. This is an example of a figure. Mean regression slopes in experiment 1 are shown for stereo motion, um, biocularly viewed monocular motion, combined, and monocularly viewed monocular motion conditions plotted by rotation amount. Error bars represent standard errors. Here's another example of a figure. Using these figures, it can convey large quantities of data quickly. It shows a functional or statistical relationship between two or more items. However, details about the individual data points are often omitted to place emphasis on the relationship that is shown by the collection of points. Graph. A two-dimensional drawing showing a relationship between two sets of numbers by means of a line, curve, a series of bars, or other symbols. Typically, an independent variable is represented on the horizontal line x-axis, and a dependent variable on the vertical line or y-axis. The perpendicular axis intersects at the point called origin and are calibrated in the units of the quantities represented. Though a graph usually has four quadrants representing the positive and negative values of the variables, usually only the northeast quadrant is shown when the negative values do not exist or are of no interest, often used interchangeably with the term chart. This is an example of a graph, a bar graph to be specific. There are four most common types of graphs, namely line graphs, bar graphs, histogram, pie charts, and Cartesian graphs. They are generally used for and are best for quite different things. Graphs are a common method to visually illustrate relationships in the data. The purpose of a graph is to present data that are too numerous or complicated to be described adequately in the text and in less space. Histogram. Stack column chart that displays a summary of the variations in frequency distribution of quantities called classes. that fall within certain lower and upper limits in a set of data. Classes are measured on the horizontal x-axis, and the number of times they occur, or the percentages of their occurrences, are measured on the vertical y-axis. To construct a histogram, rectangles or blocks are drawn on the x-axis whose areas are proportional to the classes they represent. Histograms are used commonly where the subject item is discrete, such as the number of students in a school, instead of being continuous, such as the variations of their heights. It is also called frequency diagram. A histogram is usually preferred over a histograph where the number of classes is less than 8. This is an example of histogram. A histogram is a graphical display of data using bars or different heights. In, in a histogram, each bar groups numbers into ranges. Taller bars show that more data falls in that range. A histogram displays the shape and spread of continuous sample data. Lastly, table. It is an orderly arrangement of quantitative data in columns and rows. It is also called as matrix. Tables are easily created using programs such as Microsoft Excel. Tables and figures in research papers are wonderful ways of presenting data. Effective data presentation in research papers requires understanding your reader and the elements that comprise a table. Tables have several elements, including the legend, column titles, and the body. As with academic writing, it is also just as important to structure tables so that readers can easily understand them. Tables that are disorganized or otherwise confusing will make the reader lose interest in your work. Let's go to the parts of the table. Title. Tables should have a clear descriptive title which functions as the topic sentence of the table. The titles can be lengthy or short depending on the discipline. Column titles. The goal of these title headings is to simplify the table. The reader's attention moves from the title to the column title sequentially. A good set of column titles will allow the reader to quickly grasp what the table is about. And the table body. This is the main area of the table where numerical or textual data is located. Construct your table so that elements read from up to down and not across. Importance. Non-textual elements are useful tools for summarizing information, especially when you have a great deal of data to present. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Embedding a chart, illustration, table, graph, map, photograph, or other non-textual element into your research paper can bring added clarity to a study because it provides a clean, concise way to report findings that would otherwise take several long and boring paragraphs to describe. Non-textual elements help the reader grasp a large amount of data quickly and in an orderly fashion. Non-textual elements help you highlight important pieces of information without breaking up the narrative flow of your paper. Illustrations, photographs, maps, and the like can be used as quick reference to information that helps to highlight key issues found in the text. For example, a street map showing the distribution of healthcare facilities can be included in a larger study, documenting the struggles of poor families to find adequate healthcare. Non-textual elements are visually engaging. Using a chart or photograph, for example, can help enhance the overall presentation of your research and provide a way to stimulate a reader's interest in the study. Easily compare findings. Non-textual elements, such as a bar chart or tables of statistics, offer a quick way to compare values and track trends or create figures that show side by side comparisons of information as an easy way to contrast the data. Now let's go to the structure and style. Readers should be able to discern the meaning of non-textual elements on their own without having to refer to the text to understand the data being presented. Use visual data, for example, tables and graphs, to summarize the results and make them easy to understand. Reference to a non-textual elements in the text of your paper should focus on describing its significance in relation to the research problem or the topic being discussed. Non-textual elements must have neat, legible titles, simple and have detailed captions that are written in complete sentences. They should fully explain the item without forcing the reader to refer to the text. Conversely, the reader should not have to refer back and forth from the text to the non-textual elements to understand the paper. What are the general rules about using non-textual elements in your research paper? Each non-textual element must have a short, descriptive title numbered consecutively and complete with a heading. For example, Table 1, National Sales Activity from 2009 to 2014. The title must contain the significant variables or terms that are evident in the non-textual element. Also, decide on a suitable font and caption format like bolded text and use it consistently throughout your research paper. Either place figures, tables, charts, etc. within the text of the result being described or refer to them in an appendix. Do one or the other, but never both. As much as possible, all non-textual elements should appear in the results section. However, if the figure or graph contains detailed data that would consume more pages, it would be appropriate to use the appendix part. If you place non-textual elements in an appendix, make sure they are clearly distinguished from any raw data. You should explicitly reference the number of the figures, tables, graphs, etc. in the text. Avoid expressions like in the chart of the following page or in the table below. This is to easily organize and locate the non-textual element in any part of the research paper. Data included in tables should comply with those mentioned in the main text, and percentages in rows and columns should be summed up accurately. Each non-textual element must be commented on and its relevance and significance explained in relation to the research problem. Unit of each variable should be absolutely defined. Sampling size of each group should be absolutely indicated. Values should be expressed as values positive, negative, standard error, range or 95% confidence interval. Tables should include precise p-values and level of significance as assessed with statistical analysis should be indicated in footnotes. Use of abbreviations in tables should be avoided. If abbreviations are required, they should be defined explicitly in the footnotes or legends of the tables. Meanings of abbreviations and acronyms used in the graphs and figures should be provided in explanatory notes. And the fundamental point in writing explanatory notes for graphs and figures is to help the readers understand the contents of them without referring to the main text. Rows should be arranged as double spaced. Besides, do not use pattern coloring for cells or rows and columns. Values included in tables should be correctly approximated. In graphs, independent variables should be represented on the horizontal and the dependent variables on the vertical axis. In this table, the title is aligned with the data shown in the table. Percentages in rows and columns are summed up accurately. Most of the readers priority refer to look at the figures and graphs rather than reading lots of pages. Selection of appropriate types of graphs for demonstration of data is a critical decision which requires researchers' meticulousness. In this graph, the researcher combined two non-textual elements to depict a comprehensive comparison of two variables. Flow diagram can be utilized in the results section. This diagram facilitates comprehension of the results obtained at certain steps of monitorization during the research process. Flow diagram can be used either in the results or material and method section. Now let's go to the do's and don'ts in writing the results section. Do use a box or frame to surround the element. This is to easily identify the values included and also to avoid overlapping of elements. Do not use a different text font to that used in the body of the work. For example, Arial versus New Times Roman. For uniformity and also to avoid confusion. Also, it is one way to eliminate corrections when you submit your research paper to a publication. Do not use fancy or cursive fonts. Always use the same font style with the body of research or work. Do change the page layout from portrait to landscape. If this helps you display the non-textual element more effectively, always place the top of the page along the left-hand margin and maintain page numbering. You may refer to non-textual elements by using parentheses with or without the verb see. However, it is important to be consistent with whichever choice you make. References to non-textual elements are generally put in parentheses because this information is generally supplementary to the results themselves. Most of the text should focus on highlighting key findings. Do not overuse non-textual elements. Include them sparingly and only in cases where they are an effective means for enhancing and/or supplementing information already described in your paper. Using too many non-textual elements disrupts the narrative flow of your research paper, making it more difficult for the reader to synthesize and interpret your overall research. If you must use a lot of non-textual elements, consider organizing them in an appendix. In addition, Microsoft Excel and other computer programs can create very elaborate, colorful, and dramatic looking non-textual elements. However, be careful not to let aesthetics and artistry overwhelm the message you are trying to convey to the reader. And here are my references. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.